Number 475 for Friday, July 12th. I'm Phil Franz Workington. The ICE Futures canola market was mostly lower Friday morning in thin and choppy activity as traders await the release of the USDA's monthly supply-demand report out later in the day. Canola down $1 to $4, November down $3.90 at $618.30 per ton. A steady tone in Chicago soy oil did provide underlying support, but European rapeseed and Malaysian palm oil were both weaker. Hot temperatures are forecast across much of Western Canada through the weekend, with chances of localized thunderstorm activity. Canada exported about 250,000 tons of canola during the past week, bringing this crop year's total to 6.5 million tons. That compares with 7.7 million tons exported by the same time last year. In the U.S., soybean, corn, and wheat futures are all mostly lower, with positioning ahead of today's USDA supply-demand report behind much of the activity. Pre-report expectations are for minor downward revisions to U.S. soybean production and stocks numbers. Soybean prices lower ahead of the report, down 5 cents in November at $10.62 per bushel. Poor export demand remains a bearish influence on the bean market as end users focus their attention on cheaper Brazilian soybeans. Relatively favorable U.S. crop conditions also weighed on prices. Corn trading just above contract lows as traders adjust positions ahead of the USDA data. The September contract down 5 cents at $3.95 per bushel. Expectations are for upward revisions to U.S. corn production and stocks numbers, given the larger acreage base reported at the end of June. Wheat, it is down across the board as U.S. farmers continue to make good progress bringing in this year's winter wheat harvest. However, wetness in Europe is causing delays there. France's soft wheat crop was only 4% harvested as of this past Monday. That's well off last year when a quarter of the crop was already harvested. Minneapolis spring wheat down 12 cents in the September contract at $6.06 per bushel. Kansas City hard red winter wheat down 14 cents in September at $5.69 per bushel. Chicago soft wheat 11 cents lower in the September contract at $5.60. U.S. wheat production and ending stocks are expected to be revised higher in today's report. That's a look at the ICE futures and U.S. markets for Friday, July 12th. In Winnipeg, for MarketsFarm.com, I'm Phil Franz Workington.
Outstanding capacity, innovation, and the industry's highest density come together in a New Holland roll belt round baler available from Butler Farm Equipment in Fort St. John. Whether you make 4x5 foot, 4x6 foot, or 5x6 foot bales, there's a roll belt right for you. All models feature wide, durable pickups and smooth feeding systems for faster baling. Integrated precision solutions help you make smart baling decisions on the go. Stop by Butler Farm Equipment in Fort St. John today.
The opinions expressed on this show do not represent those of the station. If you've missed any of the shows, you can follow the podcast at Energeticcity.ca. Welcome to This Week in the Peace, a show dedicated to the people, events, and news of BC's Peace region. Here's your hosts, Dub Craig and Steve Berard.
Welcome to This Week in the Peace. Later, I'll be chatting with a local lawyer about a petition he's created demanding an independent review of Northern Health Service interruptions.
But first, hot, windy weather has led to an uptick in fire activity in the Peace. A new fire was discovered just a few days ago near Tupper Creek, south of Pooskoopi, and had grown to over 100 hectares as of the other day. But we've also seen much more activity in Fort Nelson over the past week as well, since that hot, dry weather started. The BC Wildfire Service has also ordered a campfire ban throughout the Prince George Fire Center that begins today at noon. To discuss these to discuss all of these developments, we're joined now by Sharon Nickel, Information Officer with the BC Wildfire Service in the Prince George Fire Center. Sharon, welcome to This Week in the Peace.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you so much for being here. Let's start with Tupper Creek. I had said on the news this morning, as part of kind of my update on the wildfire situation, as I'd had it, that there hadn't been an update on the website since Wednesday. Can we kind of explain, first of all, why that happens, and then give an update on kind of the fire situation itself, if we could?
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks who may be watching for updates on the app or on the wildfire dashboard, those maps update automatically every 5 to 10 minutes or manually as updates are received in our information section here at the Fire Center. So if there's no change to a fire's data, so for example, it stays the same size or the same status, no changes are going to be reflected on the map. Likewise, if there's no new or additional information being received from the field regarding, say, resources on site or suppression action being taken, no changes will be added manually by our information team here. So you may see fires that look like they've kind of staled a little bit with the information, but that just means we don't have anything new from the field, or there hasn't been growth or a status change. People are always welcome to give us a call. Our information contact is right there on that page, and we can certainly chat with them further.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, if there's no new information, it means it's the same size as it is, which you can sort of take as, I suppose, good news for the moment, in that at least it hasn't grown or the status of it hasn't gotten worse, I suppose, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I want to talk about the kind of the situation leading to the evac alert, because it happened very quickly. The fire, I think, was Sunday or Monday it was discovered. We had an evacuation alert issued by the Peace River Regional District, I believe by Tuesday at 11 a.m. Tell us a bit about, if you can, the situation on the ground that led to the Wildfire Service recommending to the PRRD we should have an alert in place so people are ready to go if they have to.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, we work really closely with all of our regional districts and local authorities. And when we see something new come up, our operations folks and the folks out in the field are really looking at what kind of the initial spread is going to be, how rapidly that fire may grow, and then the current and forecasted conditions. So with the start of that Tupper Creek wildfire, just given that, it is kind of in a location not super close to any kind of property or infrastructure, with the abundance of caution, just because of the conditions that we are expecting and we are still experiencing in the piece, that evacuation alert was recommended. So just in terms of the fire at this point, it does remain 130 hectares in size. There hasn't been any additional growth overnight or due to the forecasted winds that were for yesterday. Today, there are 40 personnel on site along with 3 helicopters, and they're continuing to make good progress on that fire. There are no concerns or threats to property or infrastructure at this time, but the evacuation alert does remain in place. So, when we kind of get to a point as the BC Wildfire Service where we look at the action that's been taken and we feel confident that that threat or potential threat has passed, we can make recommendations to our partners that they can either downgrade or rescind things. That decision is up to the issuing body, so in this case, the Peace River Regional District, but that alert does remain in place right now, but their website will be the best place to go for the most up-to-date information on that alert specifically.
Let's turn to the Fort Nelson area, because again, that obviously is an area that's had a lot of impact from wildfires. The citizens of Fort Nelson and the Fort Nelson First Nation were evacuated for almost 2 weeks, if I remember right, kind of earlier in the year. Things seem to suddenly get very busy up there again with the onset of the very warm weather we saw over the weekend and earlier this week. Can you give us kind of an update on that situation in general and sort of what we're seeing in terms of just the fire activity seemingly increasing in the past week or so up there?
Yeah. So I guess first, we don't have really any big updates out of Fort Nelson, which is good news. So this means there have been no major changes to those higher profile fires like the Patry Creek, Noga Creek, and Parker Lake fires. So there's actually been a downturn in burning conditions, which provides the opportunity to catch new fires earlier on with initial attack. And early detection and aggressive initial attack is really what the zone is focusing on at this time, particularly given that the Fort Nelson zone and northern reaches stretches of the Fort St. John zone took the lion's share of about 13,000 lightning strikes about 2 nights ago. Across the Fort Nelson zone, there are approximately 200 ground personnel working, along with 20 helicopters. So as I mentioned, there has been an uptick in activity, but a lot of those fires are smaller spot fires, kind of holdovers from that lightning activity. And with the resources that we have committed in the zone, they've been able to get to those fires when they're small and manage those at that size.
I think in general in the piece, and I think a lot of areas of the province, things cooled off kind of, mid-June, something like that. We started to see a lot more rain in the piece, which was good news. Maybe you get complacent a little bit because you're like, okay, we had rain, it's cooled off. Things are going to be looking much better for the fire season. But again, it seemed like as soon as the heat moved in, we saw things kind of spark up immediately. So I wondered if you could comment a bit on the actual impact that the rain and the cooler temperatures did have in the time that we were receiving it here in the piece. It kind of looks like it had some impact, but not enough for it to kind of slow things down as soon as it warmed up again. Is that a kind of an accurate way of assessing it, or am I off my rocker?
No, it's kind of right there. So where we saw varying amounts of precipitation across the Prince George Fire Center, what we saw really at the end of June and beginning of July, it was helpful in terms of reducing fire and behavior and activity in the short term. It really offers that temporary reprieve in terms of how dry available fuels are. However, as you've just mentioned, and we've all been experiencing, several days of that hot, dry weather have made the impacts of that rain quite negligible. Where before we kind of got that significant rainfall, areas of the Peace region and Fort Nelson zone were in drought levels 4 and 5. We're looking at drought levels 3 and 4. So that drought that we've been experiencing since the fall of 2022 does have significant impacts, and it is really persistent. So it's going to take some considerable long-term rainfall to kind of get us to the point where those considerations aren't I guess, like one of top of mind. So even though we get that little bit of rain, it adds a little bit of humidity to the air. So that's not favorable for fire growth because fire likes hot, dry air and hot, dry fuels. But we're still in a spot where after 2, 3, 4 days of warm, dry weather, we're back to being quite dry. And I guess the concern with that is with the lightning that we have experienced over the past few nights, let's say over the past 72 hours, just over 19,000 lightning strikes across the fire center. We're expecting to find holdover fires, particularly in areas that have received little to no precipitation.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the campfire ban that's due to be implemented at noon today, so just under 2 hours from now. Tell us a bit about the ban and sort of the situation that led to it being put in place for really the entire Prince George Fire Center.
Yeah, the Wildfire Service does look at multiple factors when they're assessing wildfire hazard and deciding whether to implement or rescind open fire prohibitions. And in terms of the campfire ban, it's actually one that'll be going province-wide as well. But I'll speak to our fire center here because that's kind of our area. So like all the other centers, we look at the current and forecasted weather conditions, the current wildfire activity, the availability of firefighting resources or the provincial fire load and what's available provincially, as well as fire weather indices, including the buildup index. Really quick, easy way, the buildup index does represent the total amount of fuel that's available to burn on the landscape, and it looks at the moisture contents and overall effects of seasonal drought. So a lot of words, kind of tossing around, like we've got those dry fuels, we've got that persistent drought. So we are reaching those threshold levels for our fuel types up here in the Prince George Fire Center. And that just kind of says to us, there's an increased risk of fires starting. And just it's an additional way for us to take that precaution. And I guess in terms of where and what areas it affects, prohibitions that the Wildfire Service puts into place apply to all public and private lands, unless it's otherwise specified in an enactment or government bylaw.
So in that case, right, it doesn't affect Fort St. John, for example. The municipality here, the city, will make its own decision on whether there should be campfire ban within city limits, correct?
Certainly, some municipalities may have their own burn bylaws that enable them to enact their own prohibitions, but it may not always be the case. So we always recommend checking with your local authority. And really, if you're questioning whether or not you should be doing something, like err on the side of caution and maybe avoid that activity for the time being.
This might be a difficult question to answer, but now that there's going to be a campfire ban in place, what has to happen for that to be rescinded now? Is there sort of something that the Wildfire Service looks for in terms of an amount of precipitation, wind change, whatever it happens to be, that once it passes that threshold, everyone says, okay, we can rescind that. People can have campfires while they're out with their RVs on public land and whatnot again. What does that look like, if that does look like anything?
Yeah, so similar to the same way that we look at the buildup index and kind of all of those components leading up to a campfire ban, I believe the Wildfire Service has about 200 weather stations across the province. So when we're looking at our geographic area, when the threshold levels, and that'll depend on the fuel type, when those threshold levels at 60% or more of those weather stations hit that number, that's when it kind of signals to us to put on those campfire bans. Likewise, when those threshold levels fall below at 60% or more of those stations, that's when it signals that it may be okay to lift that.
All right, Sharon. Well, we're going to have to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Deb.
You're very welcome. That's Sharon Nickel, a fire information officer with the BC Wildfire Service. Stick around. Steve Berard speaks with lawyer Tyler Holte in just a moment on This Week in the Piece.
Wendy's Small Frosty is the ultimate summer refreshment. And not because it's cool and creamy and made with fresh Canadian dairy. It's also refreshingly cheap. Just 99 cents until July 14th. It's a treat for you and your wallet. Taxes extra at participating Wendy's.
Attention British Columbia, Jandel Homes has spec homes built just for you, ready for immediate delivery. That's right, beautiful move-in ready homes built specifically for BC are waiting for you. Visit our Grand Prairie Sales Center to learn how you could be in your new home this summer. Enjoy the best in modern decor and design, built for BC living. Jandel Homes, celebrating 50 years of building dreams. Learn more at jandelhomes.com.
Hey, you.
Me?
Yeah, you. What are you doing? You don't belong here.
I know. I think I'm lost.
Well, there's no way out, sister. You're stuck in here with trash like us now.
Don't throw your recyclables where they don't belong. Bring them to FSJ Return It. Cans, plastic bottles, milk jugs, juice cartons, none of them belong in the trash. Recycle them today at FSJ Return It. Open 6 days a week on 93rd Avenue in Fort St. John. As a locally owned business that works closely with the oil and gas industry, TNT Communications is proud to sponsor the 41st annual FSJ Petroleum Association Trap Shoot, July 12th and 13th at the North Peace Rod and Gun Club. TNT Communications has everything you need for the job site this summer, including light and communications towers, cell boosters, plus TNT also rents UTVs. TNT Communications, your Bell source in the Peace, and proud sponsor of the 41st annual FSJ Petroleum Association Trap Shoot.
Is your vehicle the grimiest, muddiest, or just plain dirtiest in town? We want to see it. Enter our Rudy's Dirtiest Vehicle Contest for a chance to win big. It's simple. Visit our website, fill out the contest form, and that's it. You could win $100 every month from Rudy's Truck and Car Wash. Don't miss your chance to turn that dirt into dollars and let Rudy's make your vehicle shine like new again. Visit moosefm.ca/dirtiest vehicle to enter or for more details.
Moose Country weather.
Today, a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 25 degrees. We'll see partly cloudy sky tonight with a 30% chance of showers this evening and a low of 13. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud and a high of 24. It turns cloudy in the afternoon, though, and we'll see sunny sky and 24 on Sunday.
You can watch this show live on Facebook, catch the replays at Energeticcity.ca, or be part of the show by texting your thoughts to the Fort City Chrysler line at 250-787-2222.
Welcome back. I'm Steve Berard. It's no secret that service interruptions at local hospitals have been frequent this year. We've discussed the issue with figures like Health Minister Adrian Dix, but one local lawyer, Tyler Holte, has created a petition for an independent review of Northern Health, saying enough is enough. I sat down and spoke with Holte about his petition yesterday. Okay, Tyler. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your day to talk about this. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine.
So we're talking today about, you guys sent us a letter to the editor about some issues that you were talking about with Northern Health and a petition you're running. Can you, for people who maybe haven't read that, give us a quick rundown of what all you were dealing with?
Long story short, I think with the emergency departments closing quite regularly now, I think it's a pretty serious concern for the community, and at this point I think the community deserves some very clear answers, and that's really what the petition is seeking is an independent investigation as to what is driving these closures. If Northern Health is doing a bad job, would they actually tell us? And from some of the other correspondence between physicians and the staff sent a letter in, which I interpreted as them pleading for them to fix some things, and I feel that the physicians and staff probably don't feel very listened to. So
yeah,
at the very least, this is such a critical service in our community that I think the community should demand clear answers at the very least and start from there.
Yeah, for sure. So when you talk about an independent review, what specifically are you looking for in that? Who do you think should be responsible for that review, first of all?
Well, I think it should be overseen by maybe a panel of community leaders. Like, I think it's pretty open, but it shouldn't just be ran by Northern Health and then telling us and filtering out what the results. Essentially, to have credibility, I do think it needs to be, that's what I mean by independent. It should be led or directed or overseen by the community. I don't know what kind of investigator might be the best suited for heading that, but I think at the very least, on principle, that it should be an action moving forward that we get that credibility for the community.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Like you said, these diversions, they've been impacting people in the community. This has been happening all year, basically. I think in Chetwynd specifically, there have been like 30 something.
There's a ton. And even in Fort St. John, it's a city of a considerable size. For us to regularly also not have it, it's a pretty critical service. Lives are really at stake at the end of the day. And I don't think just the notices or statements provided by Northern Health is good enough for the community. I think at this point we deserve an answer as to why a critical service can't be provided.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts? I don't know if you've seen any of the news coverage, but in Dawson Creek and in Chetwynd, a couple of times now there have been diversions where there was no public notice put out.
Yeah, and it's that's concerning as well, because then people don't know where to go.
Yeah.
I get that there's looks like it's pretty significant staff shortage at Northern Health. Like, there's a lot of the baseline positions that aren't filled. They like to advertise about a lot of aggressive recruitment measures that they're doing, but it doesn't seem they are able to retain anyone as much as quickly as they're getting people in. People are leaving, and so to me, that where there's smoke, there's fire. That there's a issue within the administration is my concern, or at least we deserve an answer as to whether there is one.
Yeah, and there have been similar sentiments echoed by people like Peace River South MLA Mike Bernier. He's talked about the management doesn't tell him when these things are happening anymore, things like that. This is becoming an increasing issue. So for your petition, tell me a little bit about sort of how the idea for that came about and maybe how people can participate.
The idea I mulled over watching this happen, and I think a lot of the community is pretty frustrated with Northern Health and where our health services are, but I decided this crosses a line, and this is really a starting point. Like, this doesn't actually fix anything except other than try to hold the institution accountable.
Yeah.
And we just deserve answers to actually form a strategy as to addressing those if there are accountability issues. That's really how it comes about. It's a petition I started online, and if it's successful, if we get a mass of the community, it's just demanding that the community as a whole also wants to see this step happen. They want those answers. There will be a link in my article for where people can go on to sign. But it is just to essentially engage, hopefully, a mass of the community that I don't know if everyone agrees with me that this is critical enough that we deserve answers, but I thought I'd start it and see where it goes. And worst case scenario, I'm on my own.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me a little about, do you have any specific goals in terms of amount of signatures? Is this specific to Fort St. John, or can people from other parts of the Peace region take part? Walk me through some of the hard details.
Well, the petition is framed in Fort St. John, and I mulled over, do I make it more of the wider communities? I know a lot of the communities have the same kind of issues, or have had similar closures. It could be that when it comes to investigation, they decide to, if that is successful, it might make sense to do it for the whole Northeast region where it seems to be a persistent issue.
Yeah.
But really, like, we just need to organize community demanding it. But the petition itself is framed Fort St. John specifically. But I think anyone could really sign off on it if they all want to see an investigation happen. But
absolutely. Do you have any goal for number of signatures at all, or what are you aiming for?
I really don't have a goal for a number of signatures. Really, at the end of the day, I my goal is to get an idea, to quantify how many voices concur in this community, and perhaps that will put public pressure on Northern Health to listen and abide by, if it is by that demand. If the community is demanding it, that they abide by it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And you said that petition's hosted online?
It's hosted online. I think on change.org is where I started it.
Okay, awesome. Now, talking about the idea of reform, you obviously mentioned that this is just a first step. This is a way of making them aware of the number of people that think this is a problem and hopefully putting some pressure on them to do a review. What kinds of things, in your opinion, do you think need to be done to try and address this crisis?
It's hard to tell now, because really the first step, what I think needs to happen is we need to have clear, credible, fulsome answers. And until we actually have a good assessment as to where issues are, if it's at the local administration level, if it's in the central Prince George administration, like, find out where the staff or medical professionals, if they don't feel listened to, which is one of my interpretations of what might be going on, where is that happening? Because it would, I think, if they did an independent investigation, it would also help Northern Health address issues. Like, it's holding people accountable is a real tough and takes a lot of active work. And when you're short that many positions, I can see it probably is just like treading water in the administration, that they're not actually holding people accountable at the various levels. So it may very well help them identify where some problems are that are driving recruitment issues, or I should say retention issues.
Yeah, for sure. So you think this is mainly a retention problem, not recruitment?
Well, like they talk about a lot of recruitment. A lot is being thrown at recruitment, but they're not showing the other side. Is there a retention problem, and what is driving that? Because every person you fail to retain, like, that's a lot of work you now have to redo to try to recruit another person to fill that role. So I am more worried about the retention issues, because that tells me there's something internal of why staff don't want to stay here.
Yeah, for sure. Why
are these medical professionals deciding to move to another part of the province or country? Is it because our health authority is the most difficult to work for?
Yeah, for sure. If this does end up, you get this review, enough people sign the signature, an independent review comes out, and it does come out that it is a retention problem, what do you think could be done to try and rectify that? Do you think this is a case of higher payment? Is this more like vacation time? What do you think is the deal that could try and keep more people here in Fort St. John?
It's really outside of my expertise, as far as I think that investigator, whatever comes out, or consultants or whoever is hired, could probably interpret what are the drivers. And whatever that, it's kind of premature for me to kind of come to a conclusion what ought to be done, or what to fix some of the retention issues. But honestly, I think the staff don't feel listened to, and that probably makes them feel like it's never going to get better.
Yeah.
The Minister of Health commented that there isn't a permanent staffing shortage in our emergency department. And I know of one of our local physicians that publicly said that was absolutely false. So when the Minister of Health doesn't understand what's going on here, I can see that really disheartening on all the local staff as to is anyone even aware, or are we ever going to be listened to as far as what
and I
needs to
think
change?
one of the other important things to focus on is that this isn't an issue with the staff that are currently working, right? Nothing but respect for those people.
Honestly, the fact that they sent that letter some weeks ago, I applaud the courage from all of the emergency department staff and physicians, because it's I probably wouldn't have thought so deeply about this issue without that letter. And along with all of our local leaders, I applaud all them advocating on this issue, but really all the internal staff. I can see it being hard writing a letter that's somewhat critical of your employer. That does take a lot of courage.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm glad that open pen letter came in, because like I said, that's what showed me that where there's smoke, there's fire, is what I think. I think that's the best evidence that there is something wrong internally.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if you guys want to sign Tyler's petition and read his letter to the editor that we've published, you can go to Energeticcity.ca, and we'll have a link to it for you right there. Tyler, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you again.
No worries.
It was hard to say that.
Yeah, that was Tyler Holte. You can find his letter to the editor and a link to his petition on Energeticcity.ca. That's what I was trying to say.
There you go. Thanks again to our other guest, Sharon Nickel, for joining us today in This Week in the Piece. And thank you very much for tuning in.
You can listen to this show again by checking out the podcast at Energeticcity.ca/podcasts. We'll store this and future episodes of the show there as we make them. Also, check out our other locally produced podcasts, Before the Piece and Secrets of the North as well. That's our show. I'm Steve Berard.
I'm